Go.
Streaming from South Africa to the world. This is the Stonks Go Moon Podcast. What just happened? We break it down so you don't have to.
Welcome everyone to Stonks Go Moon Podcast. My guest today, Yannick Myson, CEO and founder of Swarm. Welcome to the pod.
Thanks, man. Thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
So another Dutchman that's lost his, not lost his voice, but doesn't sound Dutch anymore. Sounds English. This time around, he's in China, right? I'm going to get how a Dutchman ends up in China. Yannick, tell me, how did you get into crypto?
Yeah, so we started, so me and some of my friends, we actually started mining Bitcoin really early on when I was still in college.
Okay.
It's a really long story, but I had this pretty crazy friend that kind of like got us into it.
We've got lots of time.
Yeah, so like this, like the kind of guy that would come to your house at like 4 a.m. in the morning with a printed out CIA mind reading handbook. This kind of guy. Yeah, so we got into it back then. And it was just a bit sketchy. I ended up kind of like getting busy with my life. Ended up traveling to Southeast Asia.
Okay.
Stayed there ever since. Been just like bouncing around. I did many things, man. Just didn't
go back. Just went to Asia and stayed there.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah, I was very tired of the system, man. Like I felt like there was so much that I wanted to do, and I just couldn't get my foot in the door. I was very young, really young entrepreneur. I had my first business when I was 16, online business.
Okay.
And it was just hard to get somewhere, really. I felt like everything was kind of working against me, and I was like, fuck this shit, I'm out. I'm going to find a place where I can be more free and do more business, and people, they don't care whether you have a degree or not. They care about your ideas, and they care whether you're able to turn those ideas into real action. And I found that, Southeast Asia kind of, so my family is from, part of my family is from Indonesia. So I always had this kind of like connection with.
Yeah, the roots, maybe.
The roots. Yes. Yeah. So I just ended up going there, man, like stayed for a really long time in Vietnam. Ended up organizing large-scale music festivals, doing a lot in entertainment industry and marketing. Worked with the biggest brands in the world, Heineken, Mercedes, and then eventually got back into the space through NFTs, and then really started to double down on this, like from like a blockchain perspective, because that I found that was like the first time that there was kind of like this real utility beyond just the transfer of money, and that's what really got my attention. I was like, okay, look, like something is really here. Like the ownership goes just far beyond just like kind of being a counter to currency. And I had hoped that would happen, and there were a lot of promises made, and I like bought a bunch of like tokens along the way, but nothing really seemed to come true until that point, and then it went super ballistic. And then started to dabble around in that. And then when AI came around, I got the opportunity to join a different company. It's called Delicium, token ticker AGI. Did a lot there, and then like got into like the AI and agent space and stayed there.
Yeah, because that's the thing that people don't realize in this space. It's like they're like, oh, what you do? And usually in the traditional industries, people will go, I'm a doctor, I'm a lawyer, I'm an engineer, I'm whatever. And in this space, people are changing all the time. You might be in blockchain the one day, then you're building AI agents. So that's kind of cool, where it's never boring, right? It's always changing to the next thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's a space that moves really fast, right? And I think that it's, you're on the edge of technology essentially. And I think that technology very well resembles the velocity that our society like changes at.
Yeah.
There's always a
Oh,
new
like that.
thing. There's always a breakthrough. There's always some like breakthrough that usually happens on academic level, right? Not
Yes.
always, but most of the time it's like academic level. Universities figure something out relatively rudimentary still, but there's something there, and then people pick it up and they just bam, bam, bam,
Bam,
bam,
bam,
they
bam,
hammer
go.
it home.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's why the space changes so fast.
That's super cool. What are you focusing on now? What are you building? Because sometimes I feel like talking about what it is that you start with is so vastly different from what you're doing
Yes.
now that
Yeah.
it's not even worth it because it's gonna age horribly in a year. So let's talk about what you're
Yes.
doing now.
Yeah, so I got really lucky because I met
Mm,
a lot of really great people in the space, and I got to work with a lot of great people. And one of those
how?
great people is actually my CTO. I think I'm in general a very honest and
Mm,
straightforward person, and I like to get shit
rare.
done, and
Yeah.
that's just a good vibe. That's just a
Okay.
good vibe, and people that vibe with that, it's harsh in terms of like we you know we really work hard, but it also creates some kind of culture. And I think the culture is what really was
Mm,
able to pull in the right people. So I got
yes.
lucky. I met the current CTO of our company, who's like is just a fucking genius. Like
Okay.
he's
How?
his
How did you
background.
meet? Was it social? Was it in real life? Was it Discord channel? Like, how did you meet him?
Well, he was actually with us on the previous company,
Okay.
and at one point he left that company,
Mm.
and we kind of stayed in touch.
Mm.
And like I went to visit him. He's living on Bali. We just had a good
Nice.
relationship and always riffing, with each other and kind of like sharing ideas. And he had always been in kind of like the AI agent space and AI space. He
Mm.
he actually that's like his bread and butter.
Bread
He's
and
been
butter.
doing
Yeah.
that for the last 6 years. And I'm a very visionary person, and I started to share that vision with him, and
Mm.
we just hit it off. And then,
Yeah.
where we are right now is really cool because we get to use our experience of working on all the stuff that we've
Yeah.
been working in the past, which all have to
Yeah.
do with AI agents. And now we're building a network, which is called Swarm Network.
Yes.
And really simply put, what it is, it's a multi-agent collaboration framework that runs on
Mm.
a protocol that brings arbitrary data on chain and verifies it using agents. But that's not the limit of it. Right now, we
Okay.
built that protocol and the first swarm to show people like, hey, look, this is just one of the many things that is really useful that you can do when you run an agent swarm and you build it using our framework, right?
Okay.
So how it works, really simply put, right now, like the initial, let's say, called the alpha swarm,
Mm-hmm.
is a swarm which consists of 100 agents. That agents, all of those agents, they have a certain kind of like structure within them, different teams, different responsibilities. You can call upon them using Twitter. So if you find a thread on Twitter where there's like, so let's say
Ridiculous.
like Trump posts something,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Trump posts something like ridiculous,
Uh-huh.
like something that's full of shit. I don't know, or somebody else for that matter.
Okay.
You can tag the bot. The bot is basically the entry point into the swarm, which
Yeah.
communicates with you. He's like the manager.
Okay.
He will dissect that entire piece of information that you tag him on, and he will return you a verified format of that information. So it will dissect how many claims were there, how many were false, how many were true, why are they false, why are they true, and also what are other people saying about it. And that's being broadcasted on chain.
Like a version of a truth checker or community notes,
Yeah.
but totally decentralized.
Yes, correct. Totally
Okay.
decentralized,
Mm.
owned by the community,
Yes.
hyper scalable, obviously, because
Yes.
like community nodes works great, but it's a more so I don't want to maybe I'm gonna speak my mouth, but I would
No,
say like
do
ego
it.
driven thing.
Yeah, do it.
It's very ego driven, it's
Yeah.
like, oh, I don't like this guy, like it's like left against right, we need to like we
Subjective.
need to
It's
like,
subjective. Yeah.
yeah,
It's not
it's
objective.
subjective, right?
Mm.
Things that really have to be fact checked, they're out there, they're like making rounds, and then like eventually somebody will fact check it, like some, I don't know, like things that are based off faulty scientific data, for example, or just things that are being used and completely taken out of context. And what this initial swarm on our framework is really doing is just like scaling that. It's like, okay, well, these agents, they can do the same thing that humans do, right? They can gather information, they can assess that information. We have a really beautiful protocol, like that's like truly decentralized, that takes care of like the propagation of the states of the claims, but also rewards the swarms and so on for their work. So, like now, instead of like having to rely on people, you rely on agents, and then you rely on people, right? So it's
Yes,
just
yes.
this third party thing. And you see that, it's kind of like a trend that the big platforms are going against this movement of kind of like content moderation from a governmental and institutional level. Like especially Facebook, for example, gave into that, and Mark Zuckerberg just
Yes.
recently came out and said, but they got like what, 3.2 billion people on their platform. My
Yeah.
bro, like how the fuck are you gonna moderate the content as a company? Like how? Tell me. Like what are you gonna use? Like obviously the answer is gonna be AI agents, right? And those
Yes.
AI agents better be third party, unbiased, right?
Yes.
Because if they're
Yes.
if they're in Facebook, they're pushing the Facebook agenda, right? That doesn't bring trust to the
Mm,
people. So what does
mm,
Mark need? What does Mark Zuckerberg need? Or what does Elon need?
yes.
They need people to trust the information that they consume on their platforms,
Yes.
right? So if you're doing the content moderation in-house, obviously to a certain extent that's completely fine, because there's predators, there's like terrorist cells that are recruiting people and that kind of shit. Okay,
Sure, sure.
action immediately, right? Like obviously. But then beyond that, now everybody's talking about citizens journalism. Look, you and me, Rocco, we can come out there, we can like make a fucking crazy story about anybody and it will just fly, like, who the fuck cares, right?
That's true.
We can make
That's
up some
true.
shit.
Elon says you are the media now, which isn't true. I mean,
Hmm.
it's you are a version of the media. You are part of the media, but you are not the media, because what I can say is still my opinion. No one's fact checked it. So that brings
Yes.
me to that point of the bias, right? How do you
Yeah.
make sure? Because I've used GPT since inception, and I use it every day, and I've noticed the bias change over months. Certain things you can't do anymore, and then it sort of closes, and then it becomes very left leaning, and then I can't get anything over COVID. you
Yeah.
you follow me, so that bias is there, and if you tell me
Yeah.
it's not there, it's bullshit. It is definitely there.
Yeah.
And what
Yeah.
we don't want is, we want objectivity. So because
Yeah.
once you bring in your own bias, or whoever, but whatever billionaire is backing this thing, and you're bringing your own bias, then what the truth is isn't the actual truth, it's your truth. uh,
Yes.
and that's a
Yes.
problem. So how do you stop
Yeah.
that from happening?
Yeah. So I kind of need to take a detour here because I want to
Mm,
drive this point really home. I just,
okay.
like a few days ago, I wrote a very long tweet. It was almost like an essay where I made the point that, look, like you have these fundamental protocols that connect us all together, right? Like TCP/IP is a really, really nice example of that. So
Mm,
pre-internet, you had all these like dial-up networks that were segregated. Like you had groups of 50, 100,000, few million people, but they were not interoperable with other like groups, right? So and then
silos, yeah.
TCP/IP came around. Yeah, then TCP/IP came around. Everybody adopted that because it was created on the fundamental cultural values that drive us forward as a society, which is freedom of speech and
Mm,
interconnectedness, right?
mm,
So that worked. Boom. People adopted it. The internet was born. Now
yeah.
we are able to talk to each other. You're in a different part of the world than I am. Great.
Yes, yes,
Works,
yes,
still
yes.
works. Doesn't change fundamentally, right? So on top of that, now other protocols have been built, like plenty of them, right?
Mm,
Like
mm,
protocols
mm,
for
mm,
packaging up our data and distributing it, and finding better routes or whatever.
mm,
A lot of that is actually grounded in decentralization. It's just not blockchain, but it's still decentralized system. So now
yeah.
what we need is a protocol that takes care of objectively kind of like objectively, how would you say, objectively verifying information
Mm.
as, on built on the similar or same principles that all the other protocols are built upon, right? So objectivity is obviously the first thing, and then
Mm.
like it should not be biased. So now we're
Yes.
gonna come to the point about the bias. So how do
Yes.
you have something not be biased? Well, first of all, you need the ownership of this thing to be fully distributed,
Mm.
right? So like TCP/IP is not owned by anybody. It's a protocol that we use.
Mm. Mm.
It's a protocol that we use, right? So it's the same case for our swarm, our initial swarm. We created this protocol that basically says like, okay, well, what you can do is you can submit information.
Mm.
That information then has to be assessed by a network that is very vast and large. So
Okay.
there might be like, let's say like out of all the AI agents, there's like a bunch built on open source large language models without filters. There's a bunch of them built on ChatGPT. There's a bunch of them built on Claude, like whatever. Like, and now the training cost for models is shrinking a lot. There's this Chinese team, just forgot the bloody name, but they just launched this open source large language model, and they trained it for like 2 point something million dollars,
Yeah.
and it's,
Yeah.
I don't know, like
I know what you mean.
crazy
Yeah. I
billion,
heard. Yeah.
70 billion parameters or some shit, right? So
Yeah.
okay, so that problem is solved. Like anybody can in the future build a model. So the models are
But
by default going to be more unbiased, but you need
yes.
a large enough group of agents and people to analyze the information and find consensus. So
Mm.
the most important part of it is finding consensus. So
Yes.
there's a rule that we push, which is 2/3 rule. So it means that 2/3 of the entire network has to find consensus
Mm.
and
Democracy.
identify a piece of information as objectively true or false.
Mm.
And adding on to that, there's a very strong focus on the symbiotic relationship between humans and AI. We are
Mm.
not here to take humans out of the mix because humans can still provide very important cultural,
Nuanced.
maybe contextual
Yes.
nuance.
Nuance.
Yes,
Yes. Yes.
yes, nuance, right? Like, because AI is not us and we are
No.
not AI,
Yeah.
right? AI is not a replica of our brains and our social environment. It has limited awareness of the actual world. But what it can really do well is it can take this piece of information, compare it to that piece of information, and give you a verdict,
Mm.
right?
Mm. Mm.
Without all the other stuff. So another thing that we have is a reputation. So you need to actually put up, first of all, a certain stake in the protocol for you to be able to operate, and
Mm.
then additionally you need to be able to build your reputation. And there's limits to that. Like there's guardrails in place that say like you cannot become bigger than this size
Mm.
essentially, because
Mm.
otherwise you'll be able to influence the consensus, right? So
Okay.
the more distributed it is, the more people participate, the more unbiased it essentially becomes,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So that's how we go about it.
Interesting. Yeah, because quickly, two things. That Chinese model that you mentioned, that's very biased because it's, for instance, when you asked it what happened at Tiananmen Square,
Tiananmen Square,
yeah,
yeah,
it says it doesn't throw back anything. So obviously, every
yeah,
model has its own barriers, and
yeah,
that's the
yeah,
problem.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I think I think I should add one very crucial thing here is that the action space of the agents that are part of swarms are really
mm,
important
mm,
because
yes.
so the way you have to look at it is like you might have access to
Mm,
data which I don't have access to, but that data
mm,
might be highly valuable within the network. So there's an exchange of information and kind of like an economy there. So your
yes.
swarm and my swarm have like really different capabilities and different access points and different APIs and so on, right? So
Yes.
it's
Yes.
really the
Yes.
network effect that brings it back together, right?
Yeah.
So and then like there's really simple mechanisms that you can use to objectively identify whether something is true or false.
Mm,
It's kind of like grounded in this mathematical foundation.
mm,
Like if there's enough information to support a claim, and that information is then verified by a certain amount of third, fourth, and fifth parties, then the
mm.
likelihood of that information being true is much higher, right?
Yes,
And
yes.
then like in scenarios where there's a lot of contradiction in information, then there's like there's a higher risk of something being improbable. So then
Hmm.
there's a requirement for additional rounds of gathering of information and so on.
Yeah.
So it's really about, okay, instead of using the base model, right, to asking it a certain question and expecting it to give you an answer,
Yes.
it is more a function of like, okay, here's the question. Now, which tools am I going to use,
Mm.
and which data am I going to pull in? Where did the data come from? Who provided that data? Who's the author of the data? How many people have used that data in the past, and so on. Like those are the more important metrics in the mix.
Does it work with images and video as well?
Yeah, I mean, yes, because like now the default
Because
is almost becoming like multimodal. Yeah,
yes,
because like the context is really important. It's just video is a little bit harder because video, like there's like a very intense processing
mm, mm,
um
mm.
like framework that you have to go through, so it becomes really intense. But yeah, it's possible.
So because why I'm asking, it's that it seems to be we're moving at a very rapid speed where I sort of sometimes have to check myself whether something is AI generated or not.
Yeah,
And if I have to, I mean, it's not that I'm blowing my own horn, but if I have to check myself and say, okay, let me just pause here and think about it and what am I seeing and whatever, then like 99% or 95% of the population are going to get fooled and they take that thing and they
yeah.
run up, they get scammed or whatever. And I think the application of Swarm is very unique in terms of, yeah, what I see going forward in terms of just AI fakery.
Yeah, and you know what I also think is that we will be able to kind of become a bridge between, like, people are building AI agents a lot now, especially in the
Yeah,
blockchain, but it's
yeah,
basically, like the purpose of the agents is not really well defined. It's like, okay, what
yes,
is your agent doing? It creates content, you can interact with it, and there's an asset to it. And that
yeah,
asset appreciates in value just like a meme does, right? So
yeah.
there's no substance. There's no substance there. They're like talking about crazy technical innovation, but there's none, because your
No,
agent is just the open AI wrapper, which can fucking call like deck screener or some shit, right? Like who the fuck cares, bro? Like what are you contributing to? So I think that eventually people are gonna understand that, okay, like, am I rather gonna be part of this like pump and dump scheme and
mm,
maybe get
mm,
a
mm.
little bit of money out of it, or am I gonna be part of this utility first approach to connecting more agents together? I already have this fucking agent, like
Yes,
better have it do something useful, right?
yes,
And then adding on to that, sure, yeah, you can launch an asset for your swarm, and if it really does something, maybe that asset really has value, right?
yes, yes.
And like you can see the applications of this. It's like now we created this truth protocol with the first swarm. That's
Okay.
just one swarm, bro.
Yes,
That's just
yes,
one
yes, yes,
swarm.
yes.
But like what, like, imagine, okay, let me ask you a question. If you could build a swarm, what would you build it for?
Oh, I don't even know because I haven't even thought about it. What would you build?
I mean, like, the true thing is the first one, which I'm really bullish on.
Yeah.
The second one is probably gonna be something in the direction of wealth management,
Okay.
asset management. As
Okay.
in, okay, now you have this all of this information flowing through this platform and through this network. So now how can we use this information to position ourselves in an aspect to
because
trade something.
there's so much information out there, but it's a little bit of a true thing. But because there's so much information out there, what is true, what is not, that's also something that you can do. Because I mean, if you just scroll through Twitter, you'll get so many financial texts that are garbage and nonsense, and
Yes.
maybe just like cherry pick the ones that are which are factual. That sometimes that is fascinating.
Yeah, and you know what is really cool about it? It's like, so we have a prediction market as well, and that prediction market is going to be accessible to the agents and the swarms, so you can actually make predictions on certain information. So I got the chance to meet with Vitalik a few times when I was in Susalo in Georgia.
Yeah.
And we were talking about this idea of like, how could you use these prediction markets and how can you make them AI driven, and what purpose could they serve? As in, okay, like they could probably get people to have some skin in the game, you know, like, okay, and even AI agents as well. It's like, well, I'm very confident that my factuality assessment is correct, and I'm willing to put some money on it, right?
Yeah.
So it's that's kind of like a thing which I'm also really excited about. And yeah, we actually had 4 million users in our alpha test. Yeah, so that one is it's gonna be revamped. We're gonna reintroduce that, but there's so much work we have to do, man. It's like insane. There's so many things we still have to do.
Yannick, thank you so much for joining me today. If the listeners want to go and connect with you and find out more about Swarm and how can they get involved, where can they do that?
Yeah, so there's our website, which is swarmnetwork.ai. And if you go there, I'd suggest you to also take a look at our agent license. Our agent licenses are basically kind of like these tickets to becoming an operator in the network. So you can own one of them, and you can actually operate a swarm, and you can earn revenue from your swarm and other swarms. So that's a cool thing that we're going to start bringing to market on the 27th. And then I think my Twitter and the company Twitter are two locations where there's a lot of stuff going on. I always write things and share my kind of like insights and so on.
Go and read Yannick's essays on Twitter. Thank you so much for joining me. We'll put all the links in the comments. And to our listeners, peace, love, and prosperity. We'll catch you in the next one.
Every glance, reality distorts its worth, lost within its trance. Tick tock, make it stop. Clocks of thief interrupts my mind. Tick tock, drop the clock. Freedom's what I need to find. Gears grind, metal sound. Seconds feel like solid days. Madness slowly wrapping round. Time melts in a mystic haze. Stop. in a mystic haze. Hands are moving through me now, chains that bind my fleeting hours. Crushing weight I can't allow, stripping me of all my powers. Tick tock, make it stop.